Let's do an NFL right here.
This ought to be good. You
Oh,
motherfucker. Yes. Oh, man. Oh, my God.
ooh,
Oh, wow.
man,
Wow,
you ain't right.
wow, 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 wow.
I know I ain't right.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
ain't right.
you out of pocket with this one. Oh, man.
Real out of pocket.
Just when I think you can't get no more diabolical, you do this. I'm like, oh man. I guess I go first. For me, damn. Oh wow. Oh man, I gotta start Randy. Obviously, because his name is a noun, bro. Like, I mean, come on, it's a verb. Excuse me. So I gotta start Randy. Megatron. Even though Larry Fitzgerald and you talked a lot about Larry Fitzgerald a little bit earlier about how he led the league in yards a bunch of times more than Jerry Rice, more than Randy Moss, more than a lot of players. I think his skill set at the wide receiver position when he was at his best, because he always had the hands. He always had great hands, but his skill set at the wide out position, when he was at his absolute best, I strongly believe, had it not been for the outliers like Randy Moss and T.O., those kind of guys, I strongly would consider that he would be a top three wide receiver all time. I strongly believe, but I think what a lot of people look at is like what the other guys like Randy or T.O. or Jerry Rice or even Megatron. I think Megatron was so much of an all-around talent at his best, man. You had a guy that was 6'5", could go over the top. If you needed a drag route, he could run your drag route. If you needed a flat, he could run your flat. If you needed a post, whatever it was at that position, I think he mastered it. But the question is, do I think Megatron was ever better than Larry Fitz though? This is a tough one, and I'm probably gonna get flack for this, but I'm gonna go with Megatron, and then I don't know if it's, yeah, I'm reluctantly gotta cut. Damn, PSP, you evil for this shit, man. Oh,
Why
man.
do I always get blamed for this? Yes, I come up with all this.
Bro. Like, we really cutting somebody out of this group? Like,
Yes,
this,
man. This is what I do. You don't think
this,
I
this,
take
is,
a
bro,
lot of
this
time.
is crazy. This is wild lunacy. Like, oh my god. Like, but I gotta cut Larry Fitz. Larry Fitz, I mean, as great as he was, it wasn't enough in that. It wasn't enough in that. I'm so used to being wild at the wide out position. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, when Randy in the first couple of years as a Packer fan, outside of Adrian Peterson, he frightened me. He frightened the hell out of me for years on that Minnesota team. And so I'm starting Randy. I got a bench because I got personal biases in this, man. Like, because him and they played in my division. So like, Randy played in my division. Megatron played in my division. So I'm gonna go with Randy first. I'm gonna go with Megatron second. I'm sorry, Larry, man. I gotta put you on the back end. Sorry. But yeah.
Champ.
All right. I'm starting Larry.
I knew it. I kind
I'm
of knew it.
starting Larry Fitzgerald.
I kind of knew it because you went on
I'm
that whole
starting Larry.
soliloquy. You went on that whole soliloquy about, all right, man, Larry Fitzgerald. How's he not considered one of the greatest wide receivers of all time and among some of the top?
Number one, because of the marketing. Remember, he was back. His career started before social media really took off.
Right.
People don't even realize he was drafted like 2004, 2005.
2004.
Right. Mid
So
2000s. Yeah.
yeah, so this was before social media was really taking off. He wasn't a look at me guy. Number two. So if you really watched Larry Fitzgerald, you had to really look at what he was doing on the field.
Right.
The
Absolutely.
constant, just like Marvin Harrison, I will say, the
Consummate
consummate,
professional.
the ultimate professional football player. That was what
Absolutely.
he was.
Absolutely.
And not to mention, had one of the greatest runs and greatest catches in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, still have the postseason record for receiving yards, I believe.
I think so.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he's the only person who's ranked above him in yards and receptions is Jerry Rice. Think about that for a second. People are gonna
I
say, "Oh, that's
mean,
longevity." People are gonna say that's longevity stats, but T.O. and Randy Moss both played 15 years as well.
but the champ,
So
the thing that I think the thing that we value most about a lot of wide receivers, and don't get me wrong, when like with Jerry Rice played with two legendary quarterbacks. Randy Moss, I think he played with Tom Brady. I'm not going to rule that out. He played with Tom Brady. And Larry Fitz played with Kurt Warner. But I think I think the thing that I like, I guess I want to say that people value a little bit the most outside of the wow factor and the look at me guys is basically what they were without like all the pieces around them. Would you say that? But like all the
yes, I mean, he was making Pro Bowls and leading the league in receptions without Kurt Warner.
oh yeah,
I
sure
mean,
was absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and he was leading the league in touchdowns without Kurt Warner. People don't even realize this. He only had Kurt Warner 2 years.
Right.
2 years.
2 years.
2008, 2009.
2008, 2009.
Who was another great quarterback that he had? What
He only had Carson Palmer for
Palmer.
maybe a year and a half.
Carson
Yep.
Palmer, Matt
That's
Leinart,
it. Matt Leinart was a bust.
Yeah.
Derek
bust.
Anderson, bust.
Derek Anderson.
Uh, Luke McCowan, bust.
Wow.
I mean, you look at the laundry list of quarterbacks that he
I
had.
mean, he played with 22 different quarterbacks. And we just knew, and the thing is, I follow NFL real closely, even especially back then because we didn't have the internet to help you. Remember when Dennis Green came in to
Oh
Arizona?
yeah.
They
How
thought
can I
that they
forget
were,
him?
yes, they thought, because remember who they drafted? They had the best receiving core in the league. They
Mm-hmm.
had Bryant Johnson. He got drafted
Mm-hmm.
from Florida State. They
Right.
had Anquan Bolden,
Oh.
Fitzgerald, and then they turned right back around and drafted Steve Breston. So remember, they had those four. Then they turned right back around. Remember, Edrin James had got cut. He didn't get cut. They couldn't afford to pay him in Indianapolis. They went and got him from Indianapolis.
Right.
So they were supposed to be the new Minnesota Vikings. Remember that.
Right.
Matt Leinart didn't turn out to what they wanted him to be. Kurt Warner didn't really turn up until the second half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, even when Kurt Warner was in, he was turning the ball over and holding on to a ball a bunch.
Absolutely.
And he
Absolutely.
even told Antonio Brown, be grateful that you have a great quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger. Can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine if Larry Fitzgerald would have played with Roethlisberger, with Eli,
Oh,
with Phillip Rivers, with
man.
with even a Matt Ryan?
And not only that, undisputed champ, AB had a chance to play with Tom Brady.
Yeah,
He sure did.
yeah. So
And to tip on Megatron, I think Megatron and him are a lot alike in terms of their professionalism and in terms of how they went about their business and went about the game. Megatron only played with
Stafford.
So I mean, I guess playing with 22 different quarterbacks, the sample size, I'm just like, listen,
yeah,
Larry Fitzgerald, if you carefully look at it, and a lot of people don't, because I'm kind of one of those like position to position. I'm friends with football and position, but because we already got the guys that we like that wowed us. We kind of looking at it the same way we look at basketball. Like who's the wow factor guys, and who's the guys that's like automatically you don't even have to think about when it comes to Hall of Fame. Larry Fitzgerald, you don't have to think about when it comes to Hall of Fame. You ain't even got to think about it. You ain't got to ponder.
And
So
at one point in his career, I think from 2010 to 2015, he averaged almost 100 receptions a season.
damn.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
you
champ,
talk about the numbers.
So champ, you starting Larry. Who you benching and cutting?
Now that's when it gets complicated right here. That's when it gets complicated right here. I know who I'm starting.
I already
That's
know
Larry.
how this list is gonna end, but like because you done threw yourself
Let
in
me
the
see.
back burner by putting Larry first. So I'm like, all right, I already know how
I
this is
put
going.
Larry first. At his peak, Moss. I'm benching Moss.
I knew it.
I'm cutting Megatron.
Unbelievable.
Hey, at his peak, I'm gonna tell you just like this. You couldn't take your eyes off of Randy Moss, and people don't realize this. He played with 10 different quarterbacks. Remember the first year it was Randall Cunningham. Then he put up numbers. He led the league in touchdowns with Jeff George as his quarterback. With Jeff George as his quarterback, and they cut him halfway through the season during his second season in Minnesota.
That's crazy.
I mean, especially with, and people can say what they want to about Matthew Stafford, but he was a very consistent quarterback throughout his career. The only problem that they had was he was in the same division with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. It's kind of hard to win in that division. Yeah. Very hard to win as a 1-2 punch when Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. When Brett Favre is coming in with a plethora of wide receivers, then he's followed by another Hall of Famer. So, but at his peak, I mean, think about this. The two highest scoring offenses in league history, Randy Moss was a part of them. The 2007 Patriots and the 98 Vikings.
Yep. And the only reason why Randy Moss fell in that draft was because of off the field issues. He wanted to be drafted to Dallas.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah,
but
I remember.
They already dealt with Michael Irvin, so they didn't want to deal with that again. And he got his revenge in that Thanksgiving game.
He sure did. And another thing to point out about Randy Moss, and I watched the 30 for 30 documentary. Randy Moss, in terms of athletes, like he could have been anything in this world. He could have been anything in this world. Like, listen, in terms of sport and where he came from, he could have been nothing at that too. So he could have been anything and nothing. So like the fact that he turned into what he turned into, if he wasn't playing football, he would have been playing basketball. If he wasn't playing basketball, then he'd basically be in Rand, West Virginia. And basically, like that's basically what his options was. But he was.
And here's something else to consider, if I could interrupt for a second.
Go ahead, Champ.
Randy Moss is the only player to this day in the NFL that I believe was on the Jordan brand.
I think so.
Every other player had Nikes. Bo Jackson, Dion, all those, Bruce Smith, all those other guys had Nike. Randy Moss was probably the only NFL athlete.
No.
On the Jordan brand.
It was the kid from Tennessee Titans, Javon Curse, I believe. He was on the Jordan brand too.
Yeah, I'm talking about in the early 90s, in the late 90s. He was the only football player on the Jordan brand.
It might have been Javon Curse, but in the late 90s too. But I gotta double check that. But if I had to remember, I think Randy Moss was probably the only only football player.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
I'm gonna start Randy. I'm gonna bench Fitz. And I gotta cut Megatron.
I like how we got different starters though.
Fitz to me, he has arguably the best hands ever. I mean, there's him, Chris Carter too. Let's not forget
Jerry
Chris
Rice,
Carter's hands too. Jerry. Yeah, Roundup gets mad at him. Roundup looks at Jerry Rice differently because Jerry Rice admitted that he used Stickum.
Oh yeah, right.
Everybody did that back then.
But
bro.
I'm not. But so it's really
Them
not
gloves,
that big of a deal.
If you look at those gloves, I used to play football. Those gloves are just like Stickum. They stick right. Those gloves nowadays, they stop the ball from spinning.
It stopped the ball from spinning. Yeah. So
exactly.
like, I mean, But
But
how many of them, like you said, a lot of people was using back then. How many of them from the Jerry Rice era were actually like considered top receivers in this pertaining to this conversation and pertaining to the TOs and the Megatrons and all of it? Like it's very few. I think the wideout, you could argue the wideout position, in terms of like I say late 90s all the way like to the 2000s and 2010s, man. Like you talk about some cream of the crop guys that carved out some hella careers, man.
Yeah, but like I said, a lot of that is due to marketing because if you really ask me, Andre Reed is definitely good. If you really
Oh,
ask me, James
Andre
Lofton was
Rising.
very, yeah, and people don't even want to give one guy credit because he was the all-time leading receiver while Jerry Rice was in the league, Steve Largent.
Steve Largent,
but when I look
right?
at, but I'm gonna start Randy because talent wise, Randy Moss, most talented wide receiver I've ever seen. 6'4", barely 200 pounds, just long and lanky, but he can high point the football. Randy
Absolutely.
Moss had blazing speed. The only problem Randy Moss had was Randy Moss. The knock on him is when he admitted I played when I wanted to, but when Randy, them years, you talk about Randall Cunningham, Jeff George, he also had Dante Culpepper as his
Sure did.
quarterback.
Sure
And he even
did.
made Dante Culpepper look really damn good in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at Randy, most dynamic wide receiver ever. Fitz, I give him a lot of credit with his hands and his route running. I think Fitz was also a very underrated route runner. And I also thought Fitz, the list of quarterbacks that he had to work with outside of Kurt Warner and to a lesser extent Carson Palmer and a little lesser extent Kyler Murray, who did he really have as a legit quarterback? None.
Not too much of nobody, no.
Megatron, I hate to cut him, but I have to. And
Mm.
it validates how great he was. It just tells you how great he is as a football player to cut him. And not only that, I told y'all before, Leaf, I said it. Lane Kiffin, the head coach for the Raiders,
Right.
he wanted to draft Calvin Johnson #1 overall, not Jamarcus
Marcus
Russell.
Russell. Right.
And when you and Calvin Johnson, man, he was the truth coming out of Georgia Tech. 6'5", 230, 4'3", blazing speed, man. He
So
had that.
Oh
He
yes,
had that.
he definitely had the Jets.
But the
I
reason
would
why
just
I
like
get go
I
ahead,
just
Leaf.
wanted to add, man, that Randy Moss to me, he might have been the Iverson. He might have been the Allen Iverson of the NFL. If
Him
I
or
had to
T.O.
say,
though.
yeah, him. I think T.O. was. I think.
No,
T.O.
T.O.
was
I mean T.O. though, he played with rage though.
T.O. Yeah, T.O. definitely played. He was built for
Dude played
tough
in the Super Bowl on one leg.
on one leg. Yes, he did. Like he was definitely built for tough. If I had to say, him and Randy qualify for the Allen Iverson of the NFL. And the crazy thing about it, Allen Iverson could have played in the NFL. A lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Like he was a great football player in his day. Got some at Georgetown, he was got a scholarship to play football, but he just hooped instead. Yeah. So I mean, shout out to Allen Iverson, man. Shout out to T.O. Shout out to Randy Moss, man. I mean, hella athletes, man.